Today's episode of Off the Timeline is titled, What If Joe Namath Made UCLA Larger Than Alabama? Before he was Broadway Joe, before the guarantee, before the fur coats, Joe Namath had a choice. Stay in the South and play for Bear Bryant, or go to LA where football and fame were starting to collide. And if he makes that one decision differently, Alabama still wins, but they don't control the sport anymore. Because instead of the SEC defining college football in the 1960s, they have to share the spotlight with UCLA. And once that change starts, it doesn't fully go away. You might be thinking, okay, one player doesn't change Alabama. And you're right, this isn't about Alabama collapsing. This is about something more subtle and more dangerous. Joe Namath wasn't just a quarterback. He was an early version of something college football didn't fully understand yet, a star who could shape identity. And if that star spends 1962 to 1964 at UCLA instead of Alabama, you don't just change those years, you change what happens next. And that sets the table for the real fork. In our universe, Joe Namath plays at Alabama from 1962 to 1964, while Alabama is still the standard under Bear Bryant. But here's the part people gloss over. Namath isn't exactly a perfect personality fit for Bryant's system. Bear Bryant valued control, discipline, and structure. Joe Namath brought improvisation, vertical passing, and personality. Even in our real timeline, there was friction. Now, in this alternate universe, let's remove Namath from Alabama during those years. They don't fall apart, but they lose their most dynamic passing element, their early exposure to a different offensive ceiling. In other words, they're still elite, but slightly more predictable. That doesn't break Alabama, but it changes how they evolve. Now flip it. Namath chooses UCLA, and that sets the table for the building years. Now here's where realism matters. UCLA in the early 60s, particularly 1962 to 1964, they're not close to being dominant, very inconsistent, and they're figuring things out. And that lines up with Namath's college years. So in this alternate timeline, Joe Namath doesn't walk into a powerhouse. He walks into a program that's still searching. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. Because the wins don't come immediately, but something else does. Identity. Namath changes how UCLA throws the ball, how they approach the game, and how they're perceived nationally, and most importantly, how they see themselves. Because belief builds faster than wins. And that sets the table for the handoff. Namath's college career ends in 1964. He heads towards the pros, but UCLA, they're not done yet. Because in reality, just a year later, UCLA rebounds very nicely. In this alternate timeline, that rise still happens, but it's not random. It's been shaped. The offense is more confident, the identity is already formed, and the spotlight is already warming up. This isn't a sudden breakout, it's a continuation. And now we get to the moment that defines everything in this alternate universe. And that sets the table for the game that proves it. It's mid 1960s, UCLA is at its peak, and Alabama is still Alabama. But this timeline, it's different because this isn't just UCLA playing well. This is a version of UCLA that's already been changed, not by who they are now, but by who they were just in the prior few years. With the matchup, you have Alabama that's highly disciplined, physical, and controlled, versus UCLA, which is vertical, confident, and highly unpredictable. And the game, it's a close one. 4 quarters, back and forth. Late in the fourth quarter, UCLA drives, short passes, sideline throws, clock moving. They break through, touchdown. Final score, UCLA 24, Alabama 20. And this is the moment where everything changes. Because now Alabama looks beatable, UCLA looks like the future, and the country sees both of these versions at the same time. This isn't an upset, it's a signal. And once that signal is sent, you cannot take it back. And that sets the table for Alabama responding. And this is the key. Alabama doesn't disappear, Bear Bryant adjusts. But without Namath earlier, the offensive evolution is slower, the identity stays rooted in control, and the margins are smaller. They still win, but they're no longer the only team shaping the game. For the first time, they're reacting to college football trends and not defining them. And that sets the table for this parallel timeline. Now zoom out, because while UCLA is rising, Namath is gone. He's in the pros with the Jets. But he's not Broadway Joe, he's something else. He's Hollywood Joe, because his identity was built in Los Angeles, not Alabama. That changes how he's marketed, where the hype builds, and how the AFL presents itself. At the exact moment UCLA peaks, Namath is becoming a star on a different stage. Two timelines, same origin, and this parallel timeline points west. And that sets the table for the conclusion. Alabama still wins, Bear Bryant is still a legend, the SEC still matters, but something changes. Because one decision, one player choosing UCLA over Alabama, creates a world where a rising program finds its identity earlier, the spotlight moves sooner, and the balance of influence changes. And once that happens, you don't get the same 1970s, you don't get the same 1980s, and you don't even get the same modern game. Not because Alabama failed, but because for the first time, they weren't the only ones deciding what college football looked like. And if you enjoyed what ifs that don't just change teams, but change the direction of the entire sport, stick around, hit like, comment, subscribe, and check out more videos on the end screen. And I'll see you in the next timeline.